Hollywood loves to sell perfection, the glowing smiles, the rehearsed humility, the illusion that fame and kindness walk hand in hand. But what happens when the cameras stop rolling and the charm turns to chaos? When the same stars who preach gratitude start screaming at assistants, humiliating co-stars, or demanding impossible perks? In this sequel, we're not talking about rumors, we're talking about patterns. The meltdowns, the arrogance, the quiet fear that follows certain names on every set. These are the stars who turned power into poison and success into a weapon. You think you know who the real jerks are? Think again. Some of the faces you'll see tonight were once beloved, even worshipped, until the truth slipped through the cracks of their perfect PR smiles. Let's pull the curtain again and count down 15 Hollywood stars who were the biggest jerks in real life. 15. Catherine Zeta-Jones. Catherine Zeta-Jones was the picture of elegance, a classic beauty with the grace of old Hollywood and the cool precision of a queen. On red carpets, she dazzled with confidence, every gesture refined, every smile rehearsed to perfection. But behind the diamonds and poise was a woman known for her ice-cold temperament and sharp tongue. Directors, stylists, and even fellow actors have whispered that Catherine's charm ended the moment the cameras stopped rolling. She demanded perfection in everything, wardrobe, lighting, even how others spoke to her. Crew members described her as distant and dismissive, someone who treated film sets like personal thrones. One stylist claimed she once threw an entire outfit across the room because it wasn't worthy of her silhouette. Others recalled her showing up hours late to fittings, offering no apology, and correcting people who dared mispronounce her name. To her, professionalism meant deference, and everyone else was part of the scenery. Her reputation for being difficult only grew as her fame soared. During the early 2000s, rumors circulated that she clashed with co-stars over billing and refused to share press space unless she approved the photo order. Tabloids painted her as controlling, cold, and obsessed with maintaining an image of royalty. Even when fans adored her performances, insiders described an atmosphere of tension that followed her from set to set, a frost no amount of lighting could melt. In later years, Catherine defended herself, saying she was simply a woman who knows what she deserves. And maybe that's true. Hollywood rarely forgives confidence in women the way it excuses arrogance in men. But the stories persisted, and the mystique of Catherine Zeta-Jones became inseparable from her reputation. She remains mesmerizing, undeniably talented, but also a reminder that poise and pride can look the same until you stand too close. 14. Russell Brand. Russell Brand built a career on chaos. His quick wit, messy hair, and enlightened rebel persona made him one of the most magnetic figures of the 2000s. To audiences, he was charmingly outrageous, a comedian who blended intellect with anarchy. But to those who worked with him, that energy wasn't just unpredictable, it was exhausting. Behind the spiritual talk and poetic wordplay lay a man many described as manipulative, narcissistic, and addicted, not just to fame, but to control. Early in his career, Brand's self-destructive behavior was public knowledge, the drugs, the scandals, the affairs. But as he reinvented himself into a wellness guru and social critic, a darker pattern emerged. Former colleagues and partners accused him of emotional manipulation and coercion, claiming that his charisma was a weapon. In 2023, several women came forward alleging sexual assault and abuse of power, shattering the carefully built image of a man who preached awakening while allegedly exploiting those around him. Brand denied the allegations, framing them as an attack on his freedom of speech. His followers rallied behind him, convinced he was being silenced for speaking truth. Yet, industry insiders painted a familiar picture of a man who used intellect and spirituality to disguise ego. On set, directors found him erratic, incapable of focus, constantly rewriting jokes or dominating scenes meant to be shared. One co-star famously said, "Working with Russell is like being trapped in his therapy session except you're not allowed to leave." The fallout was immense. Streaming platforms pulled his content, networks distanced themselves, and even some former allies admitted they had ignored red flags for years. What was once seen as genius eccentricity now looked like calculated chaos. Russell Brand's story isn't just about scandal, it's about charisma, gone rotten. He sold enlightenment, but delivered turmoil. And in the end, the man who couldn't stop talking became the one everyone stopped listening to. 13. Scott Rudin. Scott Rudin was one of the most powerful producers in Hollywood, a man whose name in the credits guaranteed awards, acclaim, and fear. Behind the success of films like The Social Network and No Country for Old Men stood a figure as feared as he was respected. To outsiders, he was a genius with flawless instincts. To those who worked for him, he was a tyrant. The stories from his office didn't sound like the glamorous world of cinema, they sounded like a battlefield. Former assistants called it the industry's worst job. Rudin was infamous for volcanic rage, screaming at employees, hurling phones, staplers, even baked potatoes when displeased. Staff turnover was constant. Emails leaked describing him as a monster, a man who believed terror was motivation. Many said they stayed only because working for him looked good on a resume, a twisted trade-off of trauma for opportunity. One assistant claimed she ended up in therapy after months of verbal assault. Another said he once smashed a computer monitor in front of the entire office just to make a point. For decades, his behavior was an open secret tolerated because his films won Oscars. Stars like Meryl Streep and the Coen brothers praised his perfectionism, but few dared challenge him. Hollywood's unwritten rule was simple. Scott Rudin delivers results, so no one cares how. That illusion shattered in 2021 when The Hollywood Reporter published a bombshell expose detailing years of abuse. The backlash was immediate. Unions condemned him, studios froze projects, and Rudin stepped away to work on his behavior, the kind of corporate apology that means the empire is cracking. He disappeared from public view, but the damage was irreversible. For an industry built on power, Rudin's downfall became a mirror. The man who shaped prestige cinema was undone by the same cruelty he used to control it. Scott Rudin's story is the ultimate Hollywood paradox. Brilliance built on fear, success purchased with silence. He proved that in this town, cruelty can win you everything until someone finally decides it shouldn't. 12. Chrissy Teigen. Chrissy Teigen was once the internet's darling, the quick-witted model turned influencer who seemed to embody authenticity in a sea of filtered perfection. Her sarcasm, her public affection for John Legend, her endless Twitter banter, all of it made her feel relatable. She was funny, unfiltered, and fearless. But when the unfiltered part started to sound more like cruelty, the internet that once crowned her queen turned on her with the same intensity it once adored. For years, Teigen's social media presence was celebrated as bold and refreshing. Then, old tweets resurfaced messages mocking, bullying, even encouraging self-harm toward other public figures. Model Courtney Stodden revealed that Teigen had privately told her to kill herself when she was still a teenager. Others came forward with similar stories of humiliation, claiming Teigen weaponized her platform for sport. The woman who branded herself as the real one had crossed the line between honesty and hostility. The backlash was swift and merciless. Brands dropped her overnight, sponsors pulled deals, and fans who once praised her candor now saw her as toxic. Teigen tried to apologize publicly multiple times, claiming she was ashamed and working on herself, but each apology felt more like damage control than remorse. Critics pointed out that she only addressed her behavior when it started costing her millions. Even within Hollywood, whispers spread that Teigen's off-camera behavior mirrored her online persona, biting, competitive, and obsessed with being the center of attention. Her once lucrative Empire cookbooks, talk shows, product lines began to shrink, yet she didn't disappear entirely. Slowly, she re-emerged, softer in tone, quieter, careful. Still, the internet never forgets. Tegan's name remains a cautionary tale of what happens when keeping it real turns into cruelty unchecked. She built her fame by saying what others wouldn't, and lost it for the very same reason. Chrissy Teigen's story proves that in a world fueled by likes and followers, you can be everyone's favorite, right up until the moment you show them who you really are. 11. Amber Heard. Amber Heard's rise looked like a Hollywood fairy tale: beauty, talent, activism, and a promising career that seemed unstoppable. She was the face of Aquaman, the voice for survivors of abuse, and the woman who appeared to have it all. But behind the red carpet glow was a storm that would tear through Hollywood, the media, and her own reputation. When the cameras turned to her private life, the fairy tale collapsed, replaced by one of the most divisive scandals in modern celebrity history. It began with her marriage to Johnny Depp, a union that quickly devolved into a courtroom drama broadcast to millions. Heard accused Depp of abuse, painting herself as a victim of Hollywood's dark patriarchy. But as evidence surfaced, recordings, testimonies, contradictions, public opinion shifted violently. Many began to see her not as a survivor, but as a manipulator. The trial became less about justice and more about performance, with every tear, every smirk, every pause, dissected frame by frame. On set, rumors of Heard's unprofessionalism began to spread. Crew members claimed she showed up late, treated staff with disdain, and isolated herself behind an aura of self-importance. Former assistants described her as cold, controlling, and prone to explosive mood swings. When the public turned against her, major studios quietly distanced themselves, cutting roles and freezing projects. The once celebrated face of empowerment became the internet's villain. Yet, Heard refused to disappear. She moved abroad, kept speaking about gender violence, and framed herself as a casualty of misogynistic backlash. Some fans still defend her, arguing that the world was too eager to destroy a woman who fought a more powerful man. Others insist she burned her own credibility through lies and manipulation. Amber Heard's story is not about innocence or guilt, it's about the cost of deceit in an age where every word is recorded, every emotion replayed in slow motion. She wanted to control the narrative. Instead, she became trapped inside it, a symbol of how fame and infamy can look identical until the truth starts to bleed through. 10. James Franco. James Franco once embodied the Hollywood dream: handsome, brilliant, unpredictable, and effortlessly cool. He was the intellectual heartthrob, the artist who could act, write, direct, and teach. To the public, Franco was a Renaissance man. But to those who worked with him, he was something else entirely: a man whose charm masked manipulation, whose creativity often crossed into exploitation. Behind the smile of a sensitive genius lay a reputation that would eventually destroy his career. It started quietly. Former students from his acting school accused him of inappropriate behavior, claiming he pressured young women into sexual situations under the guise of artistic exploration. As more came forward, the pattern grew clear. Franco allegedly blurred the lines between teacher and predator, using his authority to indulge his ego. In 2018, the Los Angeles Times published accounts from multiple women describing how his lessons on trust and vulnerability turned into something much darker. Franco denied the claims, calling them not accurate, but settled lawsuits years later for over $2 million, a silent acknowledgement that his brand as the deep thinker had collapsed. Co-stars began distancing themselves. Even his longtime friend Seth Rogen admitted he could no longer defend him. What had once been quirky eccentricity now looked like calculated predation wrapped in art school philosophy. The fallout was swift. Studios cut ties, streaming platforms shelved projects, and Franco vanished from Hollywood's A-list. His name, once synonymous with indie credibility, became shorthand for hypocrisy. He resurfaced years later in obscure European films, speaking vaguely about self-reflection and growth, but few were convinced. The same charisma that once opened doors now closed them. James Franco's downfall wasn't sudden, It was the slow unraveling of a man who believed intellect excused indulgence. He wanted to be remembered as a provocateur. Instead, he became a warning. In Hollywood, power disguised as mentorship is still power, and when it's abused, genius turns into something grotesque. Franco's story proves that talent without boundaries isn't brilliance at all, it's danger waiting for applause. 9. Ariana Grande. Ariana Grande built an empire on sweetness, the soft voice, the high ponytail, the promise of innocence with a hint of rebellion. From Nickelodeon darling to pop royalty, she sold perfection wrapped in pastel. Fans saw her as kind, humble, even angelic. But behind the camera flashes and vocal runs, insiders tell a very different story, one of ego, entitlement, and quiet cruelty, hiding behind a flawless smile. Early in her career, whispers began to circulate. Photographers complained she set strict rules, no photos of her left side, no red lighting, and no personal questions, or she'd walk out. Crew members on music videos described her as demanding, cold, and prone to mood swings. One story that made headlines claimed she licked donuts in a bakery, while mocking American fans, a bizarre, petty scandal that peeled back the image of the sweet pop princess. She later apologized, but the damage was done. The girl next door had a mean streak. As her fame skyrocketed, so did the stories. Bodyguards said she refused to make eye contact with staff. Stylists admitted she could be controlling to the point of cruelty. When she performed on Saturday Night Live, some crew members called her icy and dismissive. Even her romantic life became part of the discussion. Whirlwind relationships, alleged cheating scandals, and accusations that she left wreckage behind wherever she went. The most recent controversy, her affair with a married co-star during Wicked, reignited the narrative that she had outgrown humility. Despite everything, Ariana remains a superstar. Her voice, her artistry, and her obsessive fan base have insulated her from full cancellation, but the shine of her image has dulled. The same sweetness that made her famous now feels rehearsed, calculated, part of the brand, not the person. Ariana Grande's story is the modern Hollywood paradox. Adored, untouchable, yet quietly despised by those who've seen behind the curtain. She may sing about love and light, but for many who've met her, the experience wasn't so heavenly. In the end, it's proof that even angels can have claws, and some halos are just good lighting. 8. Kanye West, Ye. Kanye West, or Ye, as he now calls himself, is both a genius and a storm. A visionary who reshaped music, fashion, and celebrity itself, and a man whose own ego eventually swallowed his empire. In the early days, fans adored his confidence. He wasn't afraid to say he was great, and for a while, he truly was. But over the years, that self-belief mutated into something darker. Arrogance, paranoia, and a God complex so massive even Hollywood couldn't contain it. The warning signs were always there. Interrupting Taylor Swift's speech at the MTV Awards became a cultural moment, shocking, funny, and tragic all at once. It wasn't just a stunt, it was a preview of what was coming. As Ye's fame grew, so did his volatility. He publicly humiliated colleagues, ranted about family on social media, and treated interviews like sermons. Those close to him said he thrived on chaos, that he needed conflict the way other people need applause. Then came the political outbursts, the bizarre presidential run, and the anti-Semitic rants that sent sponsors fleeing. Adidas, Balenciaga, and countless partners cut ties, costing him billions. What had once been creative freedom now looked like unfiltered destruction. Even longtime supporters admitted they no longer recognized the man behind the music. Insiders from his fashion brand described a culture of fear, unpredictable mood swings, grandiosity, and endless monologues about divine vision. Yet Ye's story is more than just scandal, it's tragedy. Behind the ego is a man struggling with mental illness, using fame as both armor and weapon. His brilliance is undeniable, but so is his recklessness. Every time he rebuilds, another meltdown follows. Every apology sounds like the setup for the next explosion. Kanye West remains one of Hollywood's biggest enigmas, a man who changed culture but couldn't control himself. He once asked, "Do you think I'm crazy?" Maybe the better question is, can genius ever survive when it refuses to listen? Because in Ye's world, there are no limits, only echoes of the chaos he created. 7. Mel Gibson. Mel Gibson was once the perfect Hollywood hero, charming, rugged, and magnetic on screen. From Lethal Weapon to Braveheart, he ruled the box office and won an Oscar for directing. He wasn't just a star. He was a symbol of Hollywood masculinity, confident, principled, untouchable. But beneath the charisma lay a darker truth that would eventually dismantle his career, a temper fueled by rage, arrogance, and prejudice. For years, Gibson's volatility was whispered about but ignored. Then in 2006, everything changed. After being pulled over for drunk driving, he launched into a slurred, hate-filled tirade against the police, a shocking, anti-Semitic outburst that leaked to the media and destroyed his reputation overnight. Suddenly, the man who shouted "freedom" on screen was shouting hate in real life. Studios dropped him, friends distanced themselves, and Gibson became a symbol of Hollywood hypocrisy, proof that success doesn't cure ugliness of the soul. The controversies didn't stop there. In 2010, leaked recordings captured him screaming profanities and threats at his then-girlfriend, Oksana Grigorieva. The tapes went viral, cementing the image of a man consumed by rage. He later blamed alcoholism, claiming he'd found redemption through faith and sobriety. But for many, the damage was irreversible. On film sets, colleagues described him as domineering and volatile, brilliant when focused, terrifying when not. Even decades later, his reputation for aggression lingers like smoke. And yet, Gibson somehow clawed his way back. Hacksaw Ridge earned him another Oscar nomination, and slowly Hollywood reopened its doors. Some called it forgiveness, others called it amnesia. To many, he remains a cautionary tale, proof that fame can't protect you from the weight of your own demons. Mel Gibson's story is one of extremes: genius and hate, faith and fury, redemption and relapse. He's living proof that in Hollywood, even the brightest legends can cast the darkest shadows, and no amount of Oscars can hide the echoes of the things you've said when you thought no one was listening. 6. Jonah Hill. Jonah Hill built his career on awkward charm, the funny, self-deprecating guy who turned insecurity into art. From Superbad to The Wolf of Wall Street, he was Hollywood's unlikely success story, the proof that talent could trump image. But somewhere between comedy and credibility, something shifted. The humility that once made him relatable hardened into ego. Behind the camera, behind the self-help quotes, Hill's reputation quietly soured, and the mask finally cracked in public. In 2023, his ex-girlfriend, surfer Sarah Brady, leaked text messages that stunned fans. Hill, who had spent years branding himself as a champion of therapy and emotional intelligence, came across as controlling and manipulative, using therapy speak to mask toxic behavior. He framed rigid demands as boundaries, forbidding her from posting photos in swimsuits or spending time with male friends. The world saw not a mindful partner, but a master manipulator fluent in self-justification. Overnight, Jonah Hill, the poster boy for sensitivity, became the internet's case study in weaponized psychology. Hollywood insiders weren't surprised. Crew members had long described him as moody and condescending, prone to talking down to assistants and arguing with directors. During interviews, journalists noted his thin skin and defensiveness, a man desperate to be seen as serious but unable to accept criticism. His documentary Stutz, which showcased his therapist and vulnerability, briefly softened his image, but the text scandal made it look like performance, not progress. The fallout was subtle but sharp. Hill withdrew from public life, citing anxiety, while social media tore apart the carefully curated persona he'd spent years building. Some fans defended him, saying everyone's flawed. Others saw him as the ultimate Hollywood hypocrite, the guy preaching mental health while manipulating those closest to him. Jonah Hill's story is a modern tragedy, proof that self-awareness without honesty is just another mask. He wanted to rewrite his narrative, to prove he'd outgrown the jokes. But in trying to control how he was seen, he revealed exactly who he was. 5. Gwyneth Paltrow. Gwyneth Paltrow has always seemed like the definition of elegance, calm, graceful, effortlessly sophisticated. The daughter of Hollywood royalty, she was born into the spotlight and learned early how to play the part of perfection. But as her career evolved from Oscar-winning actress to lifestyle mogul, that perfection began to feel like something else: entitlement wrapped in silk. To her fans, she's a wellness guru. To many who've worked with her, she's the embodiment of Hollywood's most out-of-touch arrogance. Her company Goop became a billion-dollar empire by selling luxury self-care jade eggs, psychic vampire repellents, and $500 face creams, all marketed as the secrets to enlightenment. Critics called it pseudoscience for the rich. Paltrow didn't care. When challenged, she brushed off skepticism as ignorance. "We're changing the world," she once declared, as if her scented candles really could. On set, that same superiority showed through. Crew members described her as aloof, uninterested in small talk, and obsessed with control. "You don't work with Gwyneth," one producer joked. "You work around her." The public's patience began to thin. Her interviews often went viral for all the wrong reasons, saying she didn't know what a regular person spent on groceries, or that she'd rather smoke crack than eat cheese from a tin. She meant it as humor. It sounded like disdain. Even her friends admit she lives in a bubble so insulated that normal human interaction feels beneath her. And yet, somehow, she thrives. Her detached confidence has become her brand, a cold precision that turns mockery into marketing. When critics mocked Goop's absurdity, sales soared. Paltrow had figured out the Hollywood cheat code. If people think you're pretentious, own it. Still, her story leaves a bitter aftertaste. Gwyneth Paltrow didn't just sell luxury, she sold the illusion of superiority. To some, she's a visionary. To others, a symbol of everything hollow about fame. In the end, her greatest performance might not be on screen. It's pretending she's still relatable while floating somewhere far above the rest of us. 4. Sean Penn. Sean Penn has always been the embodiment of the tortured artist, brilliant, intense, politically outspoken, and unapologetically volatile. He's won 2 Oscars, directed acclaimed films, and even dabbled in humanitarian work, but his real legacy in Hollywood might be his temper. Behind the genius lies a man known for his volcanic moods, violent outbursts, and disdain for anyone who challenges him. To his fans, he's passionate. To those who've crossed his path, he's terrifying. Penn's temper isn't just gossip, it's legend. In the 1980s, during his marriage to Madonna, police reports and tabloid stories painted a picture of rage behind closed doors. He was arrested for assaulting photographers, accused of domestic violence, and served time in jail for punching a film extra. Though both have moved on, the shadow of those years never fully disappeared. On set, Penn's intensity often turned into confrontation. Directors have described him as brilliant but impossible, rewriting dialogue, screaming at crew members, and walking off set mid-scene if something felt inauthentic. Even outside Hollywood, his attitude fueled controversy. His public interviews swing between eloquence and arrogance. He's called journalists names, mocked colleagues, and made headlines for self-righteous rants at award shows. His political activism, from helping in Haiti to criticizing U.S. policy, often feels overshadowed by his tendency to belittle anyone who disagrees with him. "Sean doesn't debate," one producer said. "He declares." Still, there's no denying his artistry. He's the kind of performer who bleeds for a role and expects everyone else to bleed too. His performance in Mystic River remains one of cinema's most haunting portrayals of grief. But that same intensity that gives him brilliance also isolates him. Many co-stars quietly refused to work with him twice, citing the emotional toll. Sean Penn's story is the Hollywood paradox in its purest form, a man too talented to ignore and too volatile to embrace. His life proves that genius can inspire or destroy, depending on which side of his temper you're standing on. 3. Mariah Carey. Mariah Carey doesn't just sing, she reigns. With her 5-octave range, diamond-studded image, and holiday domination, she has spent decades defining what it means to be a diva. And she knows it. Fans call her the Songbird Supreme, but to the people who've worked for her, she's something else entirely, a perfectionist, so demanding, so insulated by luxury, that even her compliments can sound like commands. Behind every whistle note lies the echo of control. Her list of diva demands has become part of Hollywood legend. White flowers in every room. A new toilet seat for every hotel. Lighting so specific it has its own manual. Assistants have said she refuses to be seen in fluorescent light and insists on being carried downstairs to protect her heels. One former employee claimed she once sent a private jet just to pick up her favorite bottled water. When asked about her outrageous lifestyle, Mariah didn't deny it. She smirked and said, "I'm not demanding. I just want things to be perfect." But the perfection came at a price. Behind the glamour, former staffers described long hours, constant tension, and the fear of making even the smallest mistake. Backup singers said she'd stop entire rehearsals over one missed harmony. A former manager called her a one-woman hurricane of chaos and charm. Even co-stars weren't safe. She reportedly clashed with Whitney Houston during the Prince of Egypt recording, and her feud with Jennifer Lopez became part of pop culture history. Still, the world can't stop watching her. Every time people think she's gone too far, she turns the mockery into mythology. When asked about her rivals, she famously purred, "I don't know her," turning arrogance into art. That's Mariah's real genius. She turned being impossible into her brand. Mariah Carey's story isn't about cruelty, it's about control. She built a palace where only her rules apply, and the rest of the world just sings backup. Love her or loathe her, she's proof that in Hollywood, divas don't fade, they evolve into empires. 2. Alec Baldwin. Alec Baldwin is the definition of the Hollywood contradiction: brilliant, charismatic, and wildly self-destructive. On screen, he's magnetic, a powerhouse of charm and authority who can make arrogance look elegant. Off-screen, he's a storm. For decades, Baldwin's temper has been both his weapon and his curse, erupting in rants, arrests, lawsuits, and the kind of meltdowns that would have ended most careers long ago. Somehow, he keeps coming back angrier, louder, and more complicated than before. His outbursts are legendary. There was the infamous voicemail to his young daughter, where he called her a rude, thoughtless little pig. There were the altercations with photographers, street fights with strangers, and countless public tirades about the media. On movie sets, crew members have described him as unpredictable kind. One moment, venomous the next. One cinematographer said working with Baldwin felt like waiting for an earthquake. He demanded absolute control and bristled at the smallest sign of disagreement. Then came the Rust tragedy. In 2021, during filming, a prop gun Baldwin was handling discharged, killing cinematographer Halyna Hutchins. The accident sparked global outrage and reignited scrutiny of Baldwin's behavior. His tearful interviews painted him as a man crushed by guilt, but critics accused him of deflecting blame. Lawsuits, investigations, and public arguments followed, turning a horrific accident into another chapter in his long history of volatility. Behind the rage is a man who seems addicted to conflict. Friends say he thrives on confrontation, that peace bores him. Even his social media presence reflects it, one day reflective, the next combative and self-righteous. Yet, despite it all, Baldwin's talent keeps him afloat. His performances in 30 Rock and Glengarry Glen Ross remain untouchable, proof of how brilliance and chaos can coexist in one man. Alec Baldwin's story is Hollywood's favorite cautionary tale, a reminder that talent can take you anywhere, but temperament decides how long you stay. For every comeback, there's another explosion waiting. And in Baldwin's world, the spotlight has never been brighter or more blinding. 1. Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise is Hollywood royalty, disciplined, fearless, impossibly polished. For decades, he's been the golden standard of stardom, charming on screen, invincible off it. He runs his own stunts, leads billion-dollar franchises, and seems untouched by time. But beneath the perfect smile and relentless professionalism lies a reputation that's far more complicated. To fans, he's a legend. To many who've worked with him, he's an authoritarian, brilliant, driven, but utterly exhausting. Cruise's obsession with control is legendary. On set, he demands precision down to the smallest detail. Crew members describe him as intense beyond belief, with a gaze that feels like a command. During the height of the pandemic, an audio clip leaked from the mission, Impossible 7 set, capturing Cruise, screaming at crew members for breaking safety protocols, his voice trembling with rage. Some praised his commitment, others heard pure fury. "We are the gold standard," he shouted, as if holding Hollywood's survival on his shoulders. That moment summed him up perfectly: passionate, perfectionist, and terrifying. Then there's Scientology, the secretive organization that defines much of Cruise's private world. His devotion to it has fueled endless controversy, reports of manipulation, intimidation, and estranged relationships, including with his own daughter. Former Scientologists have claimed that Cruise's power within the church makes him untouchable, shielded from accountability by both religion and fame. He's been accused of enabling the church's darker practices while publicly maintaining an image of flawless discipline. Despite it all, Cruise remains untarnished in the eyes of the box office. He's one of the few stars who can still open a global blockbuster on name alone. That's part of the mystery, how someone so famously controlling and volatile continues to inspire loyalty. Maybe it's the sheer force of his focus, or maybe it's because deep down, Hollywood respects power even when it fears it. Tom Cruise's story is the ultimate paradox. A man who strives for cinematic perfection but leaves chaos in his wake. He's proof that you can be both savior and tyrant, and in a town built on illusion, perhaps that's exactly what it takes to stay on top. So, what do these stories tell us? That Hollywood's shine is only skin deep. Behind every glamorous interview, every perfect smile, there's often a trail of chaos no PR team can fully hide. Fame magnifies everything: the talent, the ego, and the cracks in between. For these 15 stars, power didn't just reveal who they were, it stripped away the illusion entirely. Some were cruel for control, some mistook arrogance for confidence, others believed success meant never being told no. But in every case, the same truth echoed. When you think you're untouchable, that's when the mask begins to slip. Hollywood will always forgive talent, but the world never forgets behavior. And as the lights fade and the applause dies, these stories linger, proof that even the brightest stars can burn everything around them just to keep shining. Because in Hollywood, being the biggest jerk isn't a scandal, it's a legacy,